Hi everyone and welcome to Cloudy with a Chance of Dyslexia. Today we're really delighted to have Lottie, who is the Global Team Lead for Talent Acquisition at Ethicode. She's spent over 8 years in tech recruitment and working on both agency side and in-house of software companies. But before her career, Lottie gained a lot of experience in relations with marketing, and she did a degree in journalism too, which is quite incredible. I want to dig into that. Her connection to neurodiversity is really personal. So Lottie was diagnosed when she was of dyspraxia at the age of 9 in terms of how it affects speech, coordination, social skills, etc. So her partner as well, I think this is where our neurodiverse brains sort of connect for some reason. So living and sharing what it's like to navigate this neurodivergent world is really interesting. So Lottie, you've had such a vibrant past, starting in PR, communications, and eventually your niche in tech talent, which is where we met, sparked what pivoted you to move across to the tech world? Why did you decide that?
Yeah, good question. I kind of fell into it, to be honest. So obviously, as you mentioned, my background was in public relations. I did a degree in journalism, and then I went on to move to London, work for a travel PR agency, working with mainly travel and lifestyle clients and, helping them with their communications and selling to the media, that kind of thing. Got the travel bug naturally from doing that, and then went traveling and ended up in Australia. Loved Australia, was really keen to stay. And I was actually applying for a marketing role, and a recruitment agency contacted me and they were like, you need a visa to be in this particular role. However, have you considered recruitment? Because we can hire you and we can give you sponsorship to stay in Australia. And I was like, this is amazing, like, absolutely. And so ended up working for Hayes, one of the largest recruitment agencies in the world, in marketing recruitment, and fell in love with it pretty quickly. I also learned pretty quickly as well, just like the similarities between PR and recruitment in terms of needing to build relationships, build connections, obviously the sales side of things as well, and branding. So there was a lot of similarities, and yet fell in love with it. And then moved into a boutique agency doing more kind of tech and cybersecurity style recruitment, which was very different. And yeah, I actually moved back to the UK about 3 years ago now, and went back into communication for a little while, doing kind of copywriting and comms for tech companies. And I really missed recruitment, and I really missed working with people, and I missed being part of the talent function. So that's when I kind of went back into recruitment and realised that it's where I wanted to be long term. So yeah, I kind of fell into it, but it's really worked out for me, and it fits me and my values and what I want to do really well.
So your passion for diversity and inclusion means that it's really evident. It really comes across, right? So, and this is really important, especially in the tech world, as you know, it's the split between men and women. It's still not nowhere near where it needs to be. And how do you work towards that, Lottie? And be interested to know, I know you champion this cause. How's it going?
Yeah, it's really important to me. As you touched on, I ran a meetup when I was in Australia, Women in Cybersecurity Sydney, and that was focused on creating a safe place for women and neurodivergent women in particular to kind of connect and feel safe. I found a niche in cybersecurity recruitment when I was living out there and working in agencies, and I was going to events, and often I was the only female in the room in these events. It's a very male-dominated industry, tech as a whole, but specifically cybersecurity. So I wanted to kind of create a space where women could come together, and yeah, ended up kind of building this kind of event network, and we were getting up to 100 people per event turn up, which was amazing. And I was getting feedback from women that I was really providing them with a place where they could comfortably connect with others without feeling intimidated or like they were the only female there. So yeah, really passionate about it, really enjoyed that. And obviously it was a way for me to build my own network and connect with others as well, but it was just so rewarding and such a rewarding way to do that. And I think I carry that now. I really am passionate about diversity, and I think that comes from a place of being neurodivergent myself and being a woman in tech myself as well, and understanding how it can feel to not really fit in or feel like you have a place. And I want to make sure that I'm creating a place where people feel accepted and particularly in the hiring process feel welcomed and like they can be themselves as well. So if that answers your question.
Yeah. I mean, I would say definitely in the hiring process, I've felt very connected, and the ability to share that myself, being dyslexic myself, and as an older generation, to be able to share that. It's a little bit more difficult because the way we've been brought up, the way there's not as much openness around these challenges. And I think one of the things I'm really excited about is how we can start using things like AI within the organizations we work for to really support that change within organizations, because obviously it's a transformation. It will take some time, but I think definitely the capabilities are there to help organizations build in tools to help neurodiversity within organizations to make it that much easier. So in terms of your journey, really, and I'm probably going a little bit off our conversational line here, but when you were 9 years old, going back to like when you started and that got diagnosed, how did that impact you at school? What challenges did you come up against there? And how do you think you've changed in terms of your working style?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being diagnosed was actually a little bit of a relief, to be honest, because I'd kind of grown up knowing that I was different and knowing there was things wrong. And, my parents were like, why is she so clumsy? Why has she got all these speech problems? And why is she, having problems in social situations? So I think being diagnosed was a bit of a relief, and it gave me some answers behind, why I was different to other kids at school. But in terms of the challenges, I think for me, a key one was speech, and I went through a lot of speech therapy. So dyspraxia is essentially a neurodivergent condition which slows down the messages from your brain to the rest of your body. So it affects things like coordination, balance, and obviously speech as well, because it's harder for me to form the right kind of speed and movement in my mouth to create words. So I had to go through a lot of speech therapy. That was a key thing for me. But also things like organization. So dyspraxia impacts your working memory. So I've had to work really hard to, make sure that I'm organized, that I know what's happening, that I know what I'm doing, that I know where we're up to and where we need to go next. I've formed a lot of patterns around kind of admin and making sure my calendar's up to date, because at school it was often a case of, oh no, I forgot on my book today, or oh no, I forgot to do my homework. So it's like, it's been a process. So I think the key things at school was that, but also just socially, because I was a bit different, and dyspraxia can make you a bit awkward or make you seem like you're not quite, I don't know, fitting in with other kind of social norms. So I think that was a key thing, but I think that's kind of given me a lot of empathy, which I bring to recruitment as well. Growing up being misunderstood or being different, you grow a lot of empathy for people who are different. So I think whenever I'm recruiting or working in D&I, empathy is at the forefront of everything that I do, and that's really what I think I've gained from being a neurodivergent person.
Yeah, and in a society where we're trying to move so fast, and especially with the speed of which you move within recruitment and how structured it can be, that must be I can imagine that being a real challenge. One of the things that I do is when I focus is listen to very, very dull music you can get on Spotify, but that allows you to define that or build that separation, right, of time. Yeah. And also that you don't get distracted. So I remove a lot of distractions, because there's so many things, especially with this world of social media, that can distract you very easily from the task at hand. So breaking my day down into 15-minute blocks and being very structured is really important, because I want to be, it's almost like you want to be distracted because of the condition, but you need to get the work done, right? So sometimes that happens, and you want to help as well. I think one of our passions is we love to help other people, right? But that can also, saying no is something that I've also learned is no, I've really got a ton of things to do. It's because you're passionate to help people, but you need to sort of take a step back sometimes. So in terms of global talent versus sort of local talent, in terms of the cultural, regional differences that you've noticed in hiring practices, because you do right across Ethicode, right? You're doing the whole of Europe. Right, and the States as well, because I imagine that's very different, right? So how do you manage that? I mean, I read a book called The Culture Map, which is all about how people are different in terms of how they speak in different languages, and also how they're culturally different in terms of how you connect. So how do you keep that unified way of working when you're dealing with all those different cultures? That must be really interesting, actually, in your role.
It is interesting, yeah. And I've worked in a few different companies now where, I've had to cover recruitment on a global level, not just locally. And I think naturally there is differences in terms of, culture, but also things like employment law and different ways of working and different quirks and different opinions on how job ads should go out and what should be featured in them. And obviously different salaries as well and different markets. So there's loads of different things to consider when you are working globally. So it can be tricky to really have one defined process and be kind of unified in the way that we recruit. But I think the one thing that you have to kind of bear in mind is the company mission and what we want to achieve as a company as a whole, and that has to remain the focus, as well as obviously providing a strong candidate experience and making sure that you're providing a positive experience for both hiring managers internally and also the candidates, no matter where they're located or where we're hiring. So the focus is always, okay, what are we achieving as a company and what do we want to achieve and how can we achieve that through this hiring process. So yeah, there's always quirks to consider, and that is definitely a challenge. But it's the focus has to remain on how do we make sure this candidate feels comfortable and included, and how do we create a positive process.
Well, you've talked a lot about the candidates, right? But how about yourself in terms of recruitment's really high pressure, right? It's also quite emotional, isn't it? I imagine, you can get tied in and then you have to go and tell somebody no, and that must be really hard. So how do you separate and stay grounded? And do you have a leadership principle or something that you would say if you were young in recruitment just coming through? How do young recruiters cope with that? Or how do people who are neurodiverse and in recruitment, how they cope with it? What coping mechanisms have you used? And what works? Is it a nice cup of tea or, I don't know, you tell me about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because as a neurodivergent person, I picked probably the two most brutal industries to go into. I went into PR and then I went into working in recruitment agencies. And obviously, agency side was very brutal. It was high targets. It was one day, you could make a placement, the next day the candidate withdraws. And it is difficult because you're working with humans. Typically in sales, you're selling a product. In recruitment, you're selling a person. And they have their own emotions and their own way of doing things and their own life circumstances that can change in an instant. So I think for me, the number one trait to have above all else in recruitment is empathy. And that's what kind of keeps me going. And, you're working with people who have their own kind of life complexities. And I think the main reason why recruiters fail is because they aren't able to put themselves in the candidate's shoes, and they can destroy relationships by ghosting candidates or not taking time to understand their motivations. So I think taking the time to really understand what a candidate's motivations are and et cetera can really help, because one day you can make a placement and the next day they can be like, oh no, sorry, my circumstances have changed. So I think having that kind of empathy is really important. But in terms of myself and how I look after myself, it's tricky. I think having a solid network around me, I'm lucky enough to have really great friends and family around me who, after a really bad day, I can kind of run to and be like, this has happened. And they'll be like, it's fine, let's go out for a drink or let's do this. And I think having the right people around me and the right team as well. I'm really lucky right now in my particular team that I work in. We always kind of keep each other accountable, but when things go wrong, we're there for each other as well. So I think having the right people around you is great, and also taking time for yourself. I think in my 20s I was very much focused on progressing my career and working long hours and burning myself out, whereas now I've kind of learned that to deliver the quality of work I want to deliver, I need to take time for myself as well. So, going for regular walks, not working crazy hours, having a set kind of finish time and making sure that, okay, I'm leaving work behind right now. I'm going to focus on me. And that's really helped me because, I think when you're burning yourself out, that's when things can go wrong. And that's when the quality of the work that you're providing kind of goes down as well. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, I really like that, Lottie, because the external view of recruiters sometimes can be quite brutal too. And I see a lot of negative feedback from people, and fundamentally out of a lot of people, you have to sift through a huge amount of candidates. So it must be really challenging. Getting it right is, it's going to be hard, right? So I actually have a lot of empathy for recruiters because I think some of them are bad, right? And like anything, you're always going to get good and bad. You're going to get one end of the spectrum. I think it was if you think about 360 million people in America, you're going to have really, really bad people at the top, and at the bottom, you're going to have Mother Teresa and, fantastic people, right? But you're always going to get bad people, and you can't avoid that. So you have to use a matrix to do that. You have to use a tick box to some extent, don't you? So to identify the goods and the bads, right? And that takes time. And I think we've got better at it as a society. I think we've got more people in HR, more people in human resources, and people complain about that too. But actually, it's to protect not only the organization, which you do need to protect, because that's what creates the momentum for business, in terms of good things and creating good for society. But you also need to get that balance right, and that's why it's such a challenge, right? But I'm glad you enjoy it anyway, because I can imagine, just like sales, it's a challenging industry. You're always going to get no's, you're always going to get bad months. You're always going to get a quarter that doesn't look so good. That is part of it. But as long as you're always building, and I always see what you do is that any sales process is a process, but it's a process and an art. So the empathy bit is the art side, I think, in terms of my thoughts of it. The artistic side is, you're right. You should treat your clients like human beings. They are human beings. They're going to act not like the book. They're not going to act in the same way the book says. Well, hang on, my sales book says this. It should give this outcome. How come that's not working? I'm following this process. How come that's not working? That's not true, right? We're all humans. We're all going to have a bad day, a good day. You might phone me on a bad day. You might phone me on a good day. Anyway, look, I'm going off track a little bit, but that's me. That's my no. But one thing you mentioned actually was Yorkshire tea, right? And it's one of my favourite teas, by the way. It's
nice, good
amazing,
choice.
Isn't it? Yeah. And dogs, right?
Yeah, love dogs.
I think they're we pups just down here actually. They're a real good stress reliever. So me and my wife, we walk the dog 6 o'clock in the morning, really early start, get out, walk the dog. Yeah. And these days are great. It's lovely and light, but during the winter, it's pretty brutal.
It's brutal. Yeah, it's brutal.
We got head torches and things like this. So,
yeah.
So what in your role, how do you find the joys and how do you find those cups of tea and the dog thing? How do you get that balance right? And because I'd say they're really good sort of powerful character indicators in terms of what's important when you try and find out. When you try and, I'll give you an analogy. A friend of mine gave me this, and he said, sometimes we carry our bags and we keep filling up the bag, and then it gets harder on our shoulder, and then it gets heavy and it weighs, and we carry this bag around, and we don't stop to think, I need to take something out of the bag, right? And deciding what that thing I take out the bag could be a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
But you need to decide, because otherwise you're never going to keep carrying that stuff. So you need to unpack that bag sometimes and put the stuff down that's not important and throw it away. Yeah. So what are those things? What would you say makes a workplace more human? How people connect? How, and I'm not saying about the organization you work for now. I'm talking about what do you find are those things? That cup of tea, that, what would you say is the indicators you look for?
Yeah, no, good question. And I think, like you say, those kind of small joys are so important in the workplace because, we spend the majority of our lives at work. So it's really important to kind of find those moments of joy and connection, because otherwise what's the point, right? So you need to find those moments. For me, like in every video call I have with candidates and and internally as well, I'll always kind of, have some chat about their personal lives, what they're excited about, what they're up to, what they're doing on the weekend, because you need to have those kind of moments of humanity and connection, I think. So that's what I really enjoy, because if you're just kind of talking about work and, corporate jargon all day long, it's going to grate on you. So I think for me, kind of finding those moments of humanity and seeing beyond the kind of corporate talk is really important for me. But yeah, I think for me personally, I work from home most of the time, and my dog's obviously at home as well. So whenever I have a bad meeting, I'll straight away go and spend some time with my dog. It always cheers me up. So that helps me out a lot. And like you say, cups of Yorkshire tea, never a bad idea. So.
Yeah, my dog's very important. But I have this on my board. I don't know whether I can show it. I should be able to show it. But I have next. Yeah. So I wipe something off. If something doesn't work out, I just wipe it off the board. Yeah, and then go next. Right, next thing. Because then it's done. Right. Because sometimes if you're just always creating action, then you don't have to think about it. And I listened to a program the other night. I thought, that's really relevant. Yeah, that's really relevant to life. It was actually a series on Netflix or Apple TV or something called Stick, and it's about Owen Wilson. He's a broken down golfer, and he's like,
I've heard about this.
Yeah, it's quite a good series. And his friend is like, used to be his caddy, and his caddy goes to him, do you know, he said, if you spend all your life looking in the rear view mirror, you're going to drive the car off the road. And that's what's happened to you. Yeah. And I thought, that's so true. That's so nailed on, that I know a lot of my friends that they spend a lot of time doing that. And I try and speak to them and go, yeah, but you just can't hang on to that. That's got to go. So I think with the way our brains work as well, I don't know whether you find this as somebody who is neuro, you can overthink things sometimes,
100%.
And you can spin things in your head that aren't that important. And it's about learning tactics to refocus and ignore those things, because because our brains are so wired to, I think, empathy. I think we are very wired to empathy. Mm-hmm. That empathy then hurts the other way, right? As if it's something negative that comes back. And we need to absorb that, but then take some time to take the structural criticism sometimes or the negatives, and actually then break them down and say, actually, yeah, that makes sense. That's something that I could get coached on, I can learn. So I mean, one of the things that I'd say as well was, in terms of trends in tech and workplace culture and recruiting, what would you say would be the next chapter for work life? I mean, I think AI is going to make a massive shift. Yeah. And again, it's really exciting, because I think it's a bit like the printing press. Yeah. When that was launched, it's the Dutch that did really well. The Dutch actually read like crazy, had libraries and things like that. And this is a new opportunity, a bit like that. It's to leverage this technology in the best possible way, but also in a safe way. And I think it can level the playing field for people who are neurodiverse, and even those that aren't necessarily as privileged as I am, personally, to make sure that other people get access to these tools and can use them that benefit society, I think. And that I think that's the shift. With me, it's all about the ethics behind it, and also making sure we have a good approach to what we're doing, so that we don't end up like, in the days of witch hunting and go and do the wrong things, right? I mean, we spent 200 years hunting witches, Lottie, right? So we don't have a good track record sometimes, It's like, in terms of building societies that are completely wrong and actually put us backwards 200 years, really, and then we have to go and fix all these problems that we created.
Exactly.
And I'd hate us to go down that wrong direction, and you can see some of the behaviors. Sometimes you think, okay, I need to work in the positive direction here. So Lottie, look, what are your thoughts on AI? What are your thoughts in terms of how it's going? How do you think how would that help somebody specifically like you today? Do you use it to help you? And again,
absolutely.
This isn't a direction of travel. I
think you have to embrace it, because it's not going to go away. And I think, we have to learn to use it in our day-to-day jobs. I think there's always going to be scare tactics around anything that's new. And that's happening with AI right now. There's a lot of scare tactics and fear-mongering. But ultimately, I think, it can help us. I think, for myself, as someone who struggles with organization and admin and things like that, AI can take a lot of that heavy load off, in terms of, reducing manual errors, or, scheduling interviews for me, or there's a lot of different things that it can do. So I think it's all about embracing that. It can also, screen resumes for me. So when I have, 200 applications to go through, it can process them and tell me which ones are the strongest. And it saves me so much time, which I think, as someone who is neurodiverse and can struggle with heavy workloads, it can just take that load off. So I think it can be really, really great. I think what it can't do, though, is, replace humans. And recruitment is all about people, and it's all about building relationships, and we can't just completely replace that with AI. We can use it to, enhance what we do and improve what we do, and use it to take all the kind of the admin and that stuff off us, so we can focus on improving the candidate experience, improving the hiring process, and improving our relationships with hiring managers, because we'll have more time to do that without having to do all of the admin-y things. But it can't replace humans. We need to still provide a personalized experience where every candidate feels seen and heard and isn't just receiving automated messages. So I think we need to make sure that we're still picking up the phone or having video calls with candidates and not just relying too much on AI. But absolutely, I agree. I think that it can help everyone, not just neurodivergent people in their roles. And while, it can be scary to embrace something new, I think it's going to change things no matter what. And I think we might as well see it as a positive and use it to our advantage.
Yeah, I mean, one of the because of my dyslexia, one of the things I followed, I think I shared it with you actually. Kate Krieg, he's got this charity called Made by Dyslexia, which is a positive. I think a lot of charities, they focus on the negative sides, whereas she talks about the people like Orlando Bloom, like Richard Branson, like Jamie Oliver, have gone through the pain. They've not been recognised at school. That she's very much focused on changing that, and I think that's one of the things that I really want to try and help with is raise that awareness. Look, you can make it whether you're neurodiverse or not, but the earlier you can capture the challenges, and like it was really good to hear, Lottie, that you at 9 years old were diagnosed, but think about all those children that weren't, and the things that you maybe up to that point your parents thought were challenged, and for you and me to have that test done, that shows that we have a level of privilege, right, to get that done, and how about those kids that don't, right? So it is about me. My passion is about how do we lower the bar of access for those that don't have access to this? Because they're clearly super intelligent in certain ways, right? In terms of communication skills, in terms of empathy, in terms of what we probably need in this era of AI that's coming. How do we make sure we capture that generation? Because I think we'll find more people, the art of communication in terms of conversational communication is definitely being impacted through technology in a not always a positive way, right? We're not necessarily getting in the same room together as much as we should, I think. So that's why I'm really keen on doing face-to-face meetings if I can. I was actually thinking before this session is, how can I do this outside? It's sunny, right? Why do we want to be sitting inside? I'd like to be sitting with and one of the guys that I interviewed, actually, he runs something called Cloud Realities. And his podcast talks about technology change, basically. He talks a lot about that. But he's a lot funny. It's way funnier than I am. But he's really funny. But he has about 4 or 5 people on that make the room, and that's maybe something, we could progress this too, right? Eventually, something where there's more neurodiverse people together talking about these challenges and see how many people can get in the room, but also do it externally as well and introduce more people to it, do it at events, do it outdoors, do it meeting people face to face. So, because I think that while we're not moving to Homo Deus, which is a great book, by the way, which is about the story of life, starts with Sapiens and then goes to something called Homo Deus. If we can move in that direction, then there's a lot of challenges along the way, and organizations are here to help that. So organizations such as Ethicode could really help organizations fix all these challenges. So it's quite an exciting time, I think, in history. Lottie, so look, thank you very much for coming on. I have one last question, though.
Sure.
Sort of one was about, obviously you and your husband met. Do you think neurodiversity brought you together? Was it something, do you think that connection? Do you think, really?
I think so. I think it does. I think it definitely helps. I think neurodiverse people in general, like you say, we do have a lot of empathy, but we also enjoy deep conversations and we enjoy discussing moral issues or values, and that's something that I really find. And a lot of my friends are also neurodiverse for that reason as well, because we have a lot of shared interests. We enjoy having these deep conversations about life. I don't know why that is about the neurodivergent people and why we feel that way, but I think that myself and my husband we connect over discussing things happening in the world and our values and having those kind of deep conversations. And I think that is very common amongst neurodivergent people, but also we understand what it's like to be a bit different, to not have a normal brain, and to have grown up in a way that we felt a bit misunderstood. So I think that, yeah, absolutely. I think neurodivergents connect over that. And I think myself and my husband B and my friends, we all have similarities in that way. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's my personal shared experience.
It's interesting because a lot of my friends are the other end of the spectrum. Like,
okay.
Yeah. So because I do all the talking, they don't say too much. Maybe that's it, and that works, right? They do all the listening. But No, it's interesting that, because I think maybe my wife's a little bit at the other end of the spectrum as well. But I think it's interesting how that can connect you, because I think we have this incredible ability to almost see the future, or we have a vision of what's going on, and we don't know how to connect that yet. Right? It's almost like, and that's why we're good at sales, or we're good at recruiting, or we're good at these things, because we sort of see the answer, but then we have to build the components to actually say why is that the answer. This is like, and sort of build the structure behind it sometimes.
I think as well, neurodivergent people, while growing up, had to work a bit harder than everyone else generally to, get their homework done, to pass exams. So I think in the kind of work sphere as well, we've carried that on, and we are very hardworking and very diligent. We do try and stay one step ahead because we've had to our entire lives. So I think that's also one thing to consider as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you're right. Sort of, you want to get going. You want to get a head start, don't you? Always.
Yeah.
I'm very much like that. I'm already like texting people and getting everything ready for starting with you guys next week, right? So out of interest. But okay, look, we'll I'm going to stop the recording now. But thank you very much for joining us on.
Thank you very much for having me.
With a Chance to Dyslexia, and hopefully we'll get a little jingle at the end soon, which I'm going.
That'd be great.
All right, speak soon.
Thanks. Okay.